Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today, we're going to be going over what I believe to be the top 10 reasons why it's difficult for beginners or new people to get into Gundam. Number one is that it's an anime. And unfortunately, anime just isn't as big over here as it is in Japan. Yes, this is the second biggest anime like culture in the world right now, which is America. But obviously, compared that to Japan, and it's not even close. Half the people, majority of the people here don't even know what anime is, and if they do, they think it's like the same thing as a cartoon. They don't realize that it's a completely separate entity, or I should say, medium. But that definitely hurts some of its prospective viewers, I feel. Number two is that it's a mecha show. Now, this one's a little bit more important than the first one because even though the medium does stop some people from watching it, it doesn't stop everyone. However, genre can definitely affect someone's opinion or perspective on a show. And mecha, unfortunately, in the West is definitely far less popular than any of the other genres. It kind of sucks because sometimes there are some awesome mecha shows that would probably be beloved by many more people if mecha was a little bit more popular here in the West. Not just Gundam, but other shows as well. However, it's weird because there are some shows that are hugely popular regardless of the fact that they're mecha, such as Neon Genesis Evangelion. How come Gundam doesn't get the same treatment? I don't really understand. But mecha just doesn't hold the same sway as other more popular genres do, like shonen or isekai. Those are just far more popular. So mecha shows, while I love them and many others do too, they still are not nearly as popular here in the West as they probably could be. Number three is that it's also old. Gundam has been around since 1979, so it's been around for about 40 years, or maybe a little more. That means it's a pretty old show. It's been around for 4 decades, more or less. That's impressive for any show. But it's even more impressive when you consider the fact that, well, number four, it's also very big. These two things are in tandem, but they also mean that they stretch back for a long time. And there's also the fact that it's big is that it has tons of shows and content for people to digest. The problem is that for some people it's just too much. Sometimes for some people the fact that it's old is too much, and that they won't go back, 5 years, or they might not go back past the year 2000. So it's like, okay, wait a minute. You're saying that because it's old it's bad. And that's something that is just not true, honestly. I can understand that there are some things that won't be as good, like some animation techniques won't have been introduced yet. It might not look as flashy or as accurate or whatever. But just because it's old doesn't mean it's bad. And the other one, of course, it being big, is a one that is more understandable because when you have such a large amount of content, like so many years worth of content where there's just tons of shows and movies and OVAs, it's understandable that it's very intimidating for beginners to try and start a show like that. But I say this, if you're willing to watch a shonen series that could potentially be very long or is very long, such as One Piece or Naruto, you should be able to watch a very long uh, Gundam series, a mecha show. Yes, the one difference is though those shonen series are technically one-offs. Like this one show is really long, and it will take a while before the sequel comes out, and it too is really long. Gundam is not like that. It's more condensed. There's a lot more of it, but each show is technically shorter. Like Naruto's 220, but most Gundam shows are 50. So obviously they're shorter, but there's more shows. And this is going to lead into the next number, number 5. Number 5. Gundam is complex. What do I mean by complex? Well, I have an entire series right now on my channel where I'm doing a beginner's guide. Now, might not seem like much at first, but when you think about it, if a hardcore fan feels like that they need to do an entire series of guide videos for people to understand Gundam, let alone just know where to get started. I mean, I have number 3 is literally a starting place, like where you should start. That in and of itself should tell you how complex it is. This mainly comes down to the fact that Gundam has 3 different types of shows. You have your main Universal Century shows, which most people consider to be the main Gundam timeline. Then you have the second type of show, which is alternate universe shows. These are things that take place in their own timelines that have nothing to do with the original or each other, typically. And then you have the third type, which are spin-offs, which are usually targeted towards kids, but are also still pretty good. You have all kinds of different shows within those. So, obviously it's complex, but if you want to watch the main timeline, you have to consider the fact that Universal Century is probably the most complex one because they take place all in the same timeline and it has the most content. So that probably means that you're going to have to watch shows that are connected. And if you watch those out of order, you're going to be confused. You're not going to know what the hell's going on. Yes, you technically can start with Unicorn, but when you do that, you're missing out on everything that came before, which sets up what happens in Unicorn to an extent. So you're really not going to know what's happening. So definitely complexity of the shows themselves are a big problem for beginners because they might not know what's connected to what or what show goes into what category of show or what type of show it is. So those are all problems that can definitely affect someone's interest or willingness to want to start or be interested in Gundam. Number 6, on the other hand, I'm going to start swapping over now. Instead of talking about the shows, I'm going to start talking about the community. Number 6 definitely has to go with negative reviews, in my opinion. This primarily comes down to the fact that most people want to watch what they consider to be good shows. The main problem with Gundam shows, though, is that they have a lot of negative reviews because of the community. This is going to lead into number 7, how toxic the fan base is. This is mainly because, well, we can't agree on anything. You see, the problem is that Gundam being so large, so big, so complex in its scope has created fans of all kinds of different prospects, but not others. This typically leads to a lot of infighting. There's a lot of Gundam groups that just do not like each other. And this really sucks for beginners because there's no, foundation for the community. It's just kind of a free-for-all. And then, of course, you have people who like one show but don't like another, and those shows get immediate negative reviews by the community, or at least here in the West, that heavily impact someone's thought process of where they want to start it. You know, if you see the reviews of Demon Slayer versus, say, something like, I don't know, Gundam Seed, you probably would check out, Demon Slayer before you check out Gundam Seed. Because I'm pretty sure that those reviews are a lot better than the reviews for Gundam Seed, because that particular show has an overwhelming level of hatred, even if it's not justified in my opinion. I'm the other group who don't hate Seed, but that's the problem. you automatically see that we're broken up into groups because I don't hate it and others don't either, but there's a huge majority who do. That heavily affects reviews and opinions on the show, which can affect people's perspective and even trying to watch that one particular show or Gundam as a whole because they don't know which ones are good and which ones are bad until they watch it. And they may watch a show that people say are bad and then they watch it themselves and they're like, this is actually pretty good. Why does everyone hate it? Or they'll flip around. Maybe they'll watch a show that everyone says is good. For example, say Turn A Gundam, which I don't understand. And they may agree more with me, saying that the show is terrible. So you never truly know until someone watches it. This, of course, is immediately going to put you into a different camp, though, within the community. Everyone's fighting against each other in this community, so it's hard to tell if people even like the show at all. Number 8, on the other hand, is definitely going to be one that's a little bit more obvious if you're a member already. But if you just learn about it, you're probably not going to notice that this is definitely going to affect it. Number 8 is going to be hobby, or the hobbies of the model kits. You see, models in and of themselves are an entire hobby that people do sometimes their entire lives because they just love building models. And I understand that. I've enjoyed building models of all types a lot more since I started building Gundam kits, but not everyone in general likes to build models. And on top of that, Gundam model kits are probably some of the easiest ones to build, but they seem really complex because you're building basically a humanoid robot. And most model kits are cars or they're mechanical things that are, elongated. They're usually longer, like a jet or a battleship. Those take length, but Gundam kits take height. That's the thing, that they're higher up because they're usually taller. They're about 6 inches if you just go with high grades. So, the whole idea of building a model kits may not necessarily be a problem for some, but for a lot of other people, it's too much because it's a hobby they've never really been interested in. Now, sometimes the hobby can change people's minds, but sometimes it can't, and this is definitely one that I don't feel like it can. Not everyone's going to be interested in it unless they decide to try it. Then they might be interested in it, but a lot of people won't even give it a chance because they already don't have a much of a love for model kits in and of themselves. It's kind of a dying hobby, unfortunately, in some ways, but in other ways, it's a growing hobby. It's a very weird hobby. You don't know what's going to happen with it. It's just large enough to survive, but also just small enough to where one little incident could affect the whole community, not just Gundam builders, but any modeler. It's like it exists in this weird balance between possible explosion of popularity and possible implosion. It's in a weird spot. But not everyone's going to be interested in building, model kits at all, let alone robots. Number 9 is going back to the shows themselves with animation quality. This is one that I can kind of understand, but at the same point, I have to say, you keep in mind, this is a 40-year-old series. The animation quality is going to fluctuate constantly depending on the show and the time era. Yes, the original show has horrible animation. There's no argument there. There's a lot of really bad animation. This is mostly due to budget, having to quickly rewrite and probably redraw episodes due to being canceled and, changing the story and everything. And then, of course, another one that's going to be mostly based around the fact that they didn't have the art director there because he was in the hospital. That affects animation quality. But in other shows, it is better, but sometimes there are certain scenes or characters that just look goofy. And it's like, you could have done better there. That's always going to happen no matter what the show. Um, so, you know, it happens. And then, of course, you're going to have the 90s, which had the economy explode or implode, I should say, on itself, where it just kind of got destroyed. And they had to cut budgets on all kinds of things, and that included anime and included Gundam. And then, they started to bounce back in the 2000s, and then anime started to look better than ever. So you're going to have a varying degree of animation quality. This is true. And even though I don't think it's the most important thing sometimes when it comes to anime, I mean, it is, in my opinion, the biggest part of animation, but it shouldn't stop you just because sometimes it's bad or not as good as you would want it to be. And finally, number 10, and sometimes I think this is a bit one that would affect people's opinion on it, and it's the writing. You see, most of the shows in the early days were written by the same guy, the creator of the show, Tomino. Um, but then as it goes on, the writing duty changes between shows, between types of shows, and it changes. It changes the whole universe sometimes. And this isn't necessarily a problem, but it can also lead some people to not liking certain characters or loving others. And it's variable. It's very different. It's just kind of like, oh, well, that's just how it is. And it's like, not always. Sometimes the writing's really good. Sometimes it's just average. And sometimes it's actually really interesting, but the show itself hampers the experience because it's just slow or something. Every show has its own pace, its own style, and it can really affect your opinion on it. So writing can definitely do it. Of course, pacing as well. I probably should have put that on here, but they kind of go hand in hand. So there's just a lot of things that can affect your opinion when it comes to just the writing quality. So that's really it. That's the list. I hope you guys understand and enjoy it. I just kind of wanted to get this off my chest and talk about something that I feel is important to the community. We need more and more people to come into the community and grow this community. But there's just so many problems within the community itself with the shows, and some that are impossible to change, and some that even if you did change probably wouldn't affect it that much. Like, yeah, you can make a live action show, but would that really change it that much? You could take away mechs, but then that's just going to anger the fan base. Like, you can't change certain things, but you can improve on others. The fan base itself is, of course, something that needs to be improved, but that's something that the community has to do as a whole. So I don't see that coming anytime soon. Anyways, thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell. Comment down below some of your ideas as to what you feel it makes it hard for beginners to get into the community. I like to hear your opinions. That's it. And this is Yokai, and I'm out of here, y'all.